Committee of the whole meeting. It is Monday, April 27th, 2015. Ms. Schweikhofer, please call the roll.
Ms. Barner?
Present.
Ms. Grandillo?
Here.
Mr. Hadrich?
Here.
Mr. Horvath?
Here.
Mr. Kovach?
Present.
Mr. Cudley?
Here.
Ms. McDougal?
Present.
Mr. Vaca?
Present.
Mr. Wolf?
Here.
All right, thank you. First item of business is the approval of the minutes for the March 13th, 2015 meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any additions, corrections, or comments?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Vaca.
Yes, the minutes are correct. Everything's okay with the minutes. It's the content. Two issues were brought up last week, 2 weeks ago. One was through trucking, the other one was speeding. I want to thank the police department for putting up the speed strips on Manita. Unfortunately, they also needed to be put up on East Boulevard. And I'm going to suggest the locations because of the fast tracking mothers dropping their kids off at the school. If you want to catch them at their high rate of speed, you got to get them between Bryce and Lloyd Avenue on East Boulevard. By that time, their landing wheels are starting to drop down. And also on East Boulevard between California and Pennsylvania. That's what generally, and the buses too, whichever are coming to pick those kids up. I do appreciate the strips on Manita. And then the other issue is the trucking. I had one resident in particular at a funeral we went to complain about the road, and I says, well, I've done everything I can do. I can't do no more. What I'm requesting is a request for the reports from January of 2014 to present on how many trucks were either pulled over, cited, or verbally warned about speeding in the Jog Lake area only. I don't worry about the rest of the city. That's up to the other councilmen to worry about that. Ward 1, Jog Lake area, how many trucks were pulled over from January 2014 till now? I'd like to have a report on that. And also, when the speed monitor is taken down, I'd like to report on that also. And on the what transpired the 7 days the strips were down. That's it.
All right, thank you,
We can
Mr.
bond
Vaca.
later.
So it's truckers and mothers that are, okay, all right.
Don't reverse that. It's a tongue twister.
Moving on. Mr. Kovach, you're up.
Oh, my gosh. I need to abstain from this.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All in favor of the, well, roll call, Ms. Schweikhofer.
Mr. Hadrich?
Yes.
Ms. Grandillo?
Yes.
Mr. Horvath?
Yes.
Mr. Kovach?
Abstain.
Mr. Cudley?
Yes.
Ms. McDougal?
Yes.
Mr. Vaca?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Ms. Barner?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That motion passes. Next on the agenda is the Finance Director's report. Mr. Paul?
Yes. You know that income taxes are a great part of our budget. 85% of our revenue is income tax. So if you ever want to know what the health of the general fund is, it's always focused on what are our income tax collections. As I report to you here that they're 27% of budget with a quarter of the year done, 4 months through April. And so we're in good position with regard to that. We're about $370,000 higher than last year, which is again is important because again, I try to keep and budget current year's revenue based upon last year's receipts. And so at that, with just that alone, you begin to see that general fund is doing all right for the current year. When you look at the expenses in the general fund, we're right on budget at 25% for the year. So the general fund is excellent. When you look at all the other funds, again, always look at the cash balances on those reports. And the cash balances in all of the other funds that are grouped there are all in excellent position too. So the overall health of the city is still great. The enterprise funds I indicate down here, and those are the only other two that you really look at, water and sewer, because of the only ones with significant operations of all of the rest of our funds. And the water and sewer are doing pretty well. The second quarter billings just went out, and they're a little bit less than last year, but again, not significantly different. And so I don't expect that we're going to see any problems there. The cash balances in the water and sewer funds are building, and they're in very good position for what we want to address this year. And as you all know, that later in the year we're going to come down to some capital improvements in infrastructure repairs and maintenance programs. So that's going to be extremely important for the ongoing health of the water and sewer operations in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Hattridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Paul, the 27% and the 120,000 per month higher than last year, do you forecast that to keep the same level throughout the year?
No,
Paul?
I don't. I think it'll decrease a little bit. I think we see a little bit more in January because you have usually bonuses and year-end things that come into play. But if we can finish the year at $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, that's great. Because the other side of that contribution is the expenses are usually 3% below estimates too, usually. And so combination of those two should give us a reserve of $1 million or so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paul.
Ms. McDougall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Paul, do you think some of this savings is due to some of the contracts that have begun to take place with the healthcare?
Savings, no, I haven't seen a significant drop in the healthcare yet. No, I haven't. Our collections, though, have been picking up, and as you know, the rest of the unions will come on board next year. Mm-hmm. And so that should give us close to $100,000 in feedback from employees of the city. So that'll be a good revenue source in the future, and will help reduce our overall costs. But presently, I don't see a reduction in the costs that we're accumulating. And I'll get more statistics on that in the future because I want to see how many spouses have come off the plan.
One more question?
Yes.
I know we had talked about discussing at the Committee of the Whole the funding for much of the sewer work that needs to be done in Ward 4. Any idea when we can anticipate that discussion?
Mr. True, the study, the study that was going to go on a rate study?
Mr. True?
Yeah, we have
For
some
water.
feedback already from a survey, a sanitary survey, which is kind of an oxymoron, but a sanitary survey of the water system in general. And I just received that the other day. We're evaluating that data. We'll use this data, and then we'll write the RFP for the rate study. But that helps us. But I will forewarn you, it is extremely low. We have some of the lowest water rates in the state. And I've, for years, been saying we need to raise rates, and brace yourselves. We need to raise rates. And you know, we're going to try everything we can not to, but if you don't keep a certain criteria, you can't even borrow money from the state because your water rates are too low to support your system. So I'll assimilate all that data, get it to you, but we've been working on it for years, and I know it's not the political thing that we want to do, by no means, but it's things that we have to do to keep our water system solvent and sufficient and safe for potable water. So just there'll be further discussion on it.
But one more question, just the water rate increase is not going to be sufficient to cover all of what needs to be done in the projected 5-10 years.
Mr. Chairman, not even close to it. We raise the water capital about $500,000 a year. One water project, about 2,700 linear feet. That's one street. One street from 1925 we're replacing is $1.2 million. So as you can see, there's a significant imbalance there of what we've been using the capital and infrastructure and what needs repair. You know, it gets to a time when it's 100 years old, you have to start making these replacements, you know, for the safety of fire suppression and everything else. And if we don't do it, you know, we'd be remiss. So we're going to have to make strong choices in the future and incremental. We'll talk about how we can do it incrementally and to as less upon the citizens as we can. But I'd be remiss if I didn't report to you what we've been finding and what other cities around us are doing. You know, they have increased their rates substantially through the years, which they're okay still. We have not, so now we may have to increase ours just to get the basic for the loans that we would receive to defer costs at a later date as we receive revenues from the water.
Okay.
Those loans are important because they generally come out at 0% interest rate to us. And so we'd like to take advantage of those wherever we can. And as to timing, I would think by midsummer we'd probably be discussing it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Powell.
All right, thank you. I guess the historian in me, Mr. True, says that I guess it was good that we had a stock market crash in 1929 because that entire development didn't go in back there. Otherwise, we'd be looking at a lot more sewer lines that are, water lines that are that old. So I guess history helped us out a little bit in that line. Any other questions for Mr. Paul? All right, thank you. Moving on to our agenda. Under new business, item A is employees generally for the Parks and Recreation Department. Mr. Kraus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. These 3 employees are part of our seasonal employee hires for the summer. We're looking to hire 2 for our field crew and 1 on our park staff. So this just fills in our, as I said, our seasonal staff where we have about 8 or 10 in each area. They would be working minimum wage.
Any questions for Mr. Kraus?
I do.
And the administration is asking that this be forward onto council and acted upon this evening. Mr. Hatridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kraus, I recognize at least one of these names. Are these all Aurora residents?
Yes.
Good, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir.
Actually, no, I'm sorry. 2 of them are. Jessica Reeker is not an Aurora resident, but she worked with us 2 years ago.
Okay.
She did not work with us last summer because she had an internship, but she's coming back. So, sorry, I stand corrected.
Thank you.
Move to recommend, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend this to council for action this evening. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item B is the property, casualty, and liability insurance. Mr. Paul?
Yes, of course, our insurance terminates at the end of May, and so beginning of the June year, we are in the process of looking at new coverage or retaining the old coverage. And Mr. Sutton is here. He'll answer any questions and go through what he has discovered this year's research.
Thank you.
Mr. Sutton, if you'll identify yourself, please, for that.
My name is Ben Sutton. I'm with Sutton Insurance Agency here in Aurora, and my dad is also here, Ben Sutton Sr. And we are the agents for the city's property and casualty insurance program. And I'm here tonight to review that program with you that's coming up June 1st, 2015 to 2016. And we're also going to propose an additional policy this year that provides coverage that we think is important for the city moving forward and is valuable coverage. And we'll talk about that after we review the program, the renewal program.
Okay.
So in your package, you probably have the proposal for the upcoming year. It's with U.S. Specialty Insurance Company, and it's third year of a 3-year program with U.S. Specialty. They probably have one of the best programs available for municipal insurance, pricing, coverage, claim service. You've had them for a number of years. They've come through with an excellent third-year premium and coverage, and I'm going to review that again with you. At the same time, we like to keep tabs as an agency and consultant on the marketplace, and we actually took our final pricing to 3 brokers that we deal with and had them review it as well, and they all affirmed the quality of the pricing and the coverage, and we feel very comfortable with the insurance renewal we have for you for June 1st. And what I'm going to do is just review some high points. The overall program has additional coverage limits, and it came in lower than last year, so I think very good overall program renewal. A couple of high points: the property coverage for the city is $33.5 million blanket for all the building and contents. That is an area that's increased in value this year. It's up $300,000 from last year, and that's kind of a general increase due to inflation, keeping up with the replacement cost, and then we made a couple little property increases during the year that are reflected in that higher value. Also, the equipment coverage is up about $80,000-$90,000 as well. There's been some equipment adds and deletes during the year, but net increase in equipment by about $80,000 to $100,000. So that value of $2,412,000 is an increase of $80,000 to $100,000 from last year. And on the second page, the auto coverage is the same. There's been several changes during the course of the year, and U.S. Specialty doesn't charge for add-ons unless it's a major over $100,000 value piece of equipment or auto. And you've had several adds, deletes during the year, but it's net 3 vehicles ahead of last year at this time. Again, it's a moving target. Things are being bought and sold regularly, but the premium and coverage reflects 3 more vehicles than the beginning of last year. All your liability limits are at $1 million, and then there's a $4 million umbrella, makes it a total of 5, and it's silo, so each of your liability coverage areas has $5 million of protection for you. And the renewal premium on the 3rd page is $124,481. That's a bit below last year. It's probably between close to $1,000 lower than last year's beginning premium, and then when you factor in the changes that have been made and added to this year, it's about a 2% reduction compared to last year. That is the coverage in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to respond to those.
Ms. McDougall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, this is to Mr. True, if you don't mind. I was just wondering if I recall last year when we discussed, I wasn't on council, there was several different insurance options that we were considering. Is that something that comes up every 3 years?
3 years, that's correct, and this is the 3rd year here. So it was 2 years ago that we had that option. And at that time, we were looking at a
Pool program.
pooling of a company, which is a little bit different than full coverage insurance, because then you have a sharing of the risk and so forth in that area. And you don't have the total guarantee of the insurance company there. You have to rely upon the members in the pool and their experience and what the value of the reserves are within that pool. So it was a different thing. This council chose Sutton again 3 years ago, and next year there will be another round where we will go out and ask somebody else to maybe quote our insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hattridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sutton, on the liability, $1 million,
Yes.
it's been like that for quite a few years now, is that correct?
Yes, but it's a total of 5 when you add in the umbrella.
Okay.
Total of $5 million.
Think that's enough?
It's
In
a
this day and
good,
age?
strong limit. You know, how much is enough? You could get sued for $10 million and no, it's not enough. But most 99% of the claims are settled well within $1 million. And I've never seen one go higher in all my years. And $5 million is a good, strong limit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vaca?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sutton?
Yes.
The new addition you're talking about, is that the security and privacy cyber liability?
Yes, it is. And that would be a separate proposal tonight.
Okay, so that's not involved in this?
No, it's U.S. Specialty and most of the package carriers for municipal insurance don't have that coverage, or they don't offer a good program. So we're proposing it this year with a separate carrier.
And that'll be coming shortly, or
Yeah, I can talk about it now, or we can talk about it.
when it comes? Okay, but it's not part of this package?
No, it's item G.
It's on the agenda.
It's item G.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
it's coming up. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
And Mr. DePiero?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A comment and a question. That I have had the opportunity to work with U.S. Specialty over the last year and a half, and they've been very good to work with from the law department's standpoint in handling claims. They've been very responsive, and the small reduction, although a reduction in a proposal like this is really a good thing. It's fairly unusual, frankly, for most communities. The question I have is whether any of the deductibles have changed.
Not this year. No.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Paul?
Yeah, I wanted to make one further comment when you say that we have not shopped it. Sutton has shopped our insurance, and if you'll go into what you have explored and who you've contacted and so on.
Sure.
Mr. Sutton.
I mentioned that we have a relationship with 3 other brokers that we gave them our premium and coverage information. They reviewed it with their insurance companies, and some of the carriers are Selective, Scottsdale, Travelers. They took a look at what we had and either didn't want to offer a proposal, or they concurred that we had the best pricing available. So we do keep tabs, we're consultants as well, and we do keep tabs on who's out there and who's offering what. And we routinely each year have a look at other carriers and look at them and their pricing, not formal quotes, but informal quotes and readings from the brokers to let us know that we're still the best out there for the city.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to kind of button hook with Councilwoman McDougall's question from earlier to Mr. Paul, not only do we go out every 3 years looking for another agency, but you all shop
Yes, we
every
review-
year for us as well.
We do. We have access to other carriers, and we take a look. And U.S. Specialty has always come through with lower pricing and better coverage each year that we've looked at it recently.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Okay.
You're welcome.
We have a motion to forward this to council
So
for
moved.
first,
Second.
for its first reading this evening. Okay, we have a move and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item C is a CRA tax abatement for JIT Packaging, Aurora Incorporated. Mr. Paul?
Yes, basically, JIT has applied for a tax abatement under our CRA in the industrial park. They've had these before. They had, matter of fact, I was here when they began their businesses years ago. And this abatement is being requested on a new addition they want to put up. And it's nice to see that, especially with local residents as they are. And they're proposing to put up a $2.5 million building. And within the industrial park, we generally grant the abatements at 100% tax abatement for 15 years. And Rick McDonald, as you may know, will be here to answer any question and say a little words about JIT.
I'm Rick McDonald, and my wife, Mary, and I own JIT Packaging. The company was founded by Dave Jones, another Aurora resident. Mary and I purchased the company in 2008. This year, we celebrate 30 years in business, and we're expanding.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Hatridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDonald, is this strictly going to be warehousing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Barner?
Thank you, Councilman Kindly. I just want to say congratulations. That's awesome to see an expansion and growth of new business. So hats off to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. McDougall?
Yes, I would also like to reiterate what Mrs. Barner, or Councilman Barner said. Thank you for investing in our city, and congratulations. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
moved.
Second.
We have a motion, and it's been seconded to forward this to council for its regular agenda. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item D is the wastewater treatment plant's optimization study. Mr. True?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, we sent a request for proposal out to 11 different engineering firms to do an optimization study for us. Of those, 7 came back and 3 we interviewed. We rated them, of course, professional standards and their qualifications and their known existence for years. And we've been negotiating with the current, originally they had $56,000, we've narrowed it down to $51,775. We changed the scope somewhat. We're going to do system conditions and redundancy requirements as determined by the city and the 10 state standards, which are essentially the engineering standards for the plant. Every one of the interviewees had said our plant currently has remaining capacity. We knew that, so we kind of pulled that scope out. The future regulatory requirements for ammonium nitrate, dissolved inorganic nitrogen to DIN, and total phosphorus. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, and it is. That's why there's a lot of science behind wastewater treatment plants. Also, they're also going to reach out to the EPA and help us out. And I will say we started investigating with some other firms before this, and both of them were in the 6-figure to do both plants. They wanted 50 each plant. This firm's going to do it for $51,775 both plants, and along with us, we will see what we can do, what's the prioritization of what we can fix, what we can't fix, what we don't need to fix, and the things that are still working and will work well into the future. So it'll leave a prioritization plan so we can see what we need to do for capital improvements in the future for the wastewater plants. Both of them are about 22 years old. Usually the life capacity of plants about 20 years. We've had significant upgrades 15 and 18 years ago. So we don't believe there'll be any significant upgrades, but we will need some things such as the filters and some of those screening beds and tertiary sand replacements. Not significant, but like I said, we want to put a number to it, and that's why we wanted a firm to help us out so we can think outside of the box as well as inside the box to do the best for the citizens.
All right, thank you, Mr. True. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. True, the drinking water study that you mentioned earlier and this study, I'm assuming that when you put the two of them together, since they each represent about half the water bill, you're going to use both of those together to determine the rate increases you were talking about overall? Are they going to apply to, are you going to bring the rate increases to us for just the drinking water piece, or the drinking water piece and the sewer piece?
Mr. True?
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, we'll take a look at the rate study independently with the water as we will the capital. I don't see any large projects for the capital for the sewer as of right now, but we will examine closely, and if it needs to be, we will bring it forward to you.
Thank you.
All right. And it's being asked by the administration, this go on to our regular agenda.
Second.
I have a question.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Hatridge?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. I'm sorry. I was a little bit late coming in. Mr. True, how long will it take to complete this report? Any idea?
I believe we have it for 14 and 17 weeks that will take it to do an in-depth study. We have taken out all the computer program, which is a WinOp. It's more expensive. That actually looks at the mixed liquors and everything else that's in the digesters. We removed that part out of the study, so it's significantly them walking the plant and taking a look at it and comparison analysis. So 14 to 17 weeks.
Okay, and what active role will the EPA play in this report?
Mr. True?
Mr. Chairman, while we've had no violations with the EPA or nothing, we will reach out to the EPA and we will actually have meetings to say what is coming up, what are you doing with the total dissolved solids and your total phosphorus? Are there any significant changes that we need to reorganize or redistribute our plant to change our processes? We don't believe there is, but it doesn't hurt to reach out and talk to them. So we will be reaching out and meeting with the EPA on this matter.
Okay, one more question.
Mr. Hatridge?
Mr. True, on this, is this, I guess my question is on the waste treatment plant. Is this plant right now large enough to handle all the needs of the citizens of Aurora?
Mr. True?
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, yes, it's large enough to handle all the needs of the city of Aurora and total build-out of the city of Aurora right now. Right now, and total build-out with the existing parcels we have available. So our plants and the space that we have, that our forefathers were smart enough to think about designing them, we actually, the plants of today and the different scientific nature with nanofabrics and anaerobic versus aerobic digestion, and you can do it both on the same with a smaller footprint. We have more than enough room, more than enough capabilities with the existing plants. We just need some minor modifications and some equipment repaired. But yes, they're capable.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Collins.
thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of moving this on to council, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item E under new business is a memorandum of understanding for the Portage County Park District and AMATS. Mr. Kraus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, Mr. True and myself met with representatives from Portage Park District as well as AMATS to discuss kind of the next step of how we might be able to extend the hike and bike trail from Manaway, where it currently ends, into Aurora. And this is the first step in that. Portage County, since most of it would handle in Portage County, we were asking them to kind of head it up. The thought was that we each entity would put in a third of the total cost for this preliminary feasibility study. Study, again, is intended to kind of look at options and have a couple of options of how to connect those two. We know the train line is obviously the first option, but that's also been the one that's been the most difficult. So this is also to come up with some secondary options of where that trail might run. Obviously to try to connect to, like I said, from Manaway on Mennonite, where the trail currently ends, to into Aurora, into kind of like Sunny Lake and Golf Course and kind of in that area. So we're looking for approval for this. The law director felt it was important to bring this forward as a, even though it's only a $5,000 expenditure, for this study. Once this is approved, then they will go out, Portage County will go out and do an RFQ for firms to actually then do the study. This will then lead to eventual engineering drawings, but that'll be something we'll discuss at a future time.
Right, okay. Comments or questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Hattridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kraus, do you think that any of these trails that we're talking about would come in through the Spring Hill properties? I know right now that the old railroad tracks is in the background back there, but.
Correct. The chairman
Mr.
to the
Kraus?
councilman, yes, potentially. Yeah, whether it's on the train line or potentially on Pioneer Trail itself.
Okay, do we have a lot of easements coming down this way to,
That's part of what this study will look at. Look at all the easements that we would need to potentially acquire or what those may be.
one more question, please, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Hattridge?
If this comes to be, not the study, but the thing will work, are these costs going to be shared by Portage County, Aurora, and Ametz or not?
The chairman to the councilman,
Mr.
we
Kraus?
do not know at this time. So those will be discussions we'll have in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. It's being requested that this go on to council's agenda for action this evening.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Next one's yours also, the ballpark path paving, item F. Mr. Kraus.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We are looking to pave the existing asphalt grinding path that runs by the baseball fields. This currently extends from the corner of the skate park around Field 5 and over kind of between the new fields. This is not the path that extends from the parking lot over to the businesses. So that's this is just to extend that. It's about 800 feet long. We're asking for an 8-foot wide path. Basically, they would just come in with 1.5 inches. The proposal is for 1.5 inches base coat with 1.5 inches top coat. We're recommending Perrin asphalt. I went out and solicited 3 proposals for this instead of actually formally bidding it because we felt that that would keep the cost down due to some of the formal requirements that are in our formal bid packet. So therefore, we'll need an extra vote to approve this for that. But Perrin Asphalt is the best and most responsible bidder at $16,500.
Mr. Kraus, question in regards to the other path that's been recently put in, with the grindings going, past the new parking lot. How long is that path?
How long in feet?
Yes.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to give you an educated guess at
I'm
about
just wondering why,
200 feet maybe.
why wouldn't, we go ahead and do that one too at the same time we're doing the rest of the asphalt grinding in Quantas Moore Park? I mean, it just seems logical that we would do that also.
We haven't budgeted for that this year, so that would be something we would have to come back for an additional expenditure, so that would be something we'd have to confirm with the mayor. So,
Could you get us an idea of what that would cost potentially to do?
yeah, I can. I mean, typically if you just break it down by the foot, if this price at 800 feet, you divide
Right,
it
that's
by
why
foot.
I asked how long that
So yeah,
that
I'd have
path
to
is.
figure that out, because we have little connectors as well that pop off of that kind of change a little bit.
Okay.
So I can get that for you.
I would hope that council could find the money to get that done too. Okay.
Let's have a big sale.
We can, several bake sales, but, okay, Ms. Barner.
Thank you, Councilman Cudley. Actually, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask the same question while we're doing the one. If we could just do them together, it would make sense, but if we didn't have the money in there, maybe by doing both of them together, we can get a lower rate. I don't know, being hypothetical here. I obviously am a huge advocate of this. I think it'll be great for those who entertain that whole path, because I know it's been full of gravel and downhill and wet and mud and potholes. So anybody with strollers, bicycles, it's an easier access to get to those fields. So I think this is terrific, and hopefully weather permitting and budget permitting, this will go through. And I as well, with Mr. Cudley's comment, do advocate, might as well do both at the same time if feasible. So thank you, and hopefully this can get done soon.
All right, thank you. Mr. Vaca.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kraus, is this picking up where it ends off, or are we doing the whole thing from the beginning? where, I'm not familiar with it, so I don't know, but where it stops, I guess you're picking up from there and continuing through to the final
Mr. Kraus?
destination?
Chairman to Councilman Baca, yeah, the current paved path runs from the existing parking lot through the playgrounds,
Yeah.
and then it turns at the skate park, runs behind the fire station, and runs along the third base side of the varsity baseball field.
Okay, so
This
is-
basically picks up kind of where it splits at the skate park and goes the other way around the field. So then we will have a complete loop, but it does, as Councilman
looks
Barton
like-
mentioned earlier, it does pick up all the other fields that are in that location. It does solve some erosion problems that we're having, and access and some other stuff as well.
Okay, it looks like it's all the way from the road to the final destination.
Correct.
That's why I asked.
Correct, yep, to the road.
Thanks.
Right. Mr. Hattridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kraus, so the other path that you just talked about, that's still going to be in use? This new path is not replacing that? This is in addition to the path that's there right now, correct?
This is
Mr.
paving
Kraus.
on top of the existing path that's there. So the existing path that runs in that exact location provides the base for then this paving. We don't then have to, when in paving it, they don't have to construct a new path, bring in new base and all that. They can just come in for the most part with a smaller top coat.
So this yellow line here, that's the new path, that exists already?
Yes,
Yes.
Blacktop?
asphalt grindings.
Okay. News to me. Thank you.
Mr. Kovach?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Kraus, I thought when we put that parking lot in, that the path to Mad Jack's was inclusive in the parking lot cost.
Mr. Kraus?
I
think we better go back and review that.
As far as paving it, no, because I know our intent initially was not to pave that path. There was some engineering in some parts of the path project that were included, such as the concrete steps were part of that project. Some of the drainage pipe was part of it, but the actual path itself was all intended for us to do it in-house with our own asphalt grindings.
Could you just make sure that was
Yes.
what was in there? I don't see that being highly used to warrant it to be other than what you have down there now, so if you can do that for me, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Barner?
Yes, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify for other council members. It's almost as an existing path now, it just is not very user-friendly, I guess, to say the least, for people who are walking, or actually it'll be very convenient for now that we do have a parking lot that was expanded, for people to be able to park in anywhere around the fields and be able to carry or use a wagon, bicycle, whatever, easier access to get around those fields, because obviously you can't have a parking lot on those fields. You can now much more readily, easily to go to those fields. So just to second that and clarify it.
Okay. Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Kraus, thank you. My family and I use this path to walk up to the football fields on Friday nights in the fall. So walking from our house up there was could be treacherous at times on the asphalt grindings. You will know they'd wash out, and you'd wind up with some interesting situations along that stretch. So I, for one, was really happy to see this. I appreciate this. So thanks.
One more question, Mr. Kraus. Do you, obviously, since we're going to pave that, we don't anticipate any more large vehicles coming off the drive going behind the stadium onto that? Heavy equipment?
No, yeah, not as far as our equipment, no, we don't anticipate that, no.
Because it would be a shame, I mean, because of the construction that's been going on there, big vehicles have been going on and off of that, so we don't anticipate any more like that after it's paved.
Correct, yeah, we don't anticipate, we don't have any, this was kind of the other step. If we were to do any other improvements in that area, obviously we would look at sort of a construction road or something that would not use this. But we don't anticipate bringing any larger stuff, just would be primarily our light pickup trucks that would potentially use it. But again, that would be intermittent and sporadic at times with the usage.
All right, thank you. We have a motion yet?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to forward this to council's regular agenda. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Last item of new business is item G, cybersecurity insurance. Mr. Sutton.
Ben Sutton, Sutton Insurance again. We wanted to propose this year one additional coverage to the city's insurance program that we feel is becoming more prevalent and a greater risk for most businesses or entities nowadays. And it's referred to as data breach liability, cyber liability, privacy liability. I think you probably don't go a week without reading something in the paper about Target or Anthem or Home Depot, somebody having a breach of personal information, often due to hackers getting into the system. Sometimes it's as simple as an employee throwing away a document with personal information on it, or a laptop is stolen and it has personal information on it. But there's laws and regulations that make the response to that pretty expensive, and it's not covered under, regular general liability or the regular liabilities of the city. So we wanted to propose it as an additional item, and we did review it with several companies, and we got quotes anywhere from the one we're proposing at $5,400 to $15,000 for $1 million of protection. But we're proposing coverage with AIG. They used to go by Chartis, and the brochure that we included with the proposal says Chartis on it. That's AIG. They're an A, excellent rated insurance carrier. They offer a program. There's really two major coverages that we like to see in this, and that's third-party liability coverage if the city were sued for a breach of somebody's personal information. So the third-party liability coverage, that's in here, and also first-party coverage or costs. And that's there's a package of first-party coverages. It's termed event management coverage under the proposal. Things like the notification costs of letting people know that their information is out there, providing the credit monitoring service that you're required to do. There's forensic costs where somebody comes in and reviews your system and finds out how it happened and how to stop it from happening again. Various other reimbursements for regulatory costs, things like that, all included in the package. We decided to start with $1 million, proposed that. That's, again, a pretty good limit. Could go higher than that. A lot of them are smaller and wouldn't reach that limit. But for $1 million with a $25,000 retention, the premium for this coverage was $5,403, and we wanted to recommend that to the city this year for coverage effective June 1st as well.
Okay. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sutton, I want to thank you for bringing this to us. This is something I'd spoken to the mayor about previously, and when I talked to her recently, and she said she and Mr. Paul had reviewed it, and that you had brought it forward. I was extremely pleased. I've seen these things run into, being in the industry, I've seen them run into $60, $70, $100, $200,000 when these guys from Russia get a hold of your systems and lock them up, and they want to be paid in Bitcoins, and they're not releasing anything until you do. So I'm very pleased to see that we're adding this coverage to the city, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Barner?
Thank you, Mr. Cudley, and I want to second that. I'm glad that we're being proactive as opposed to reactive in something. This is definitely, personally, it's happened to myself and my husband twice, unfortunately. So I can totally relate. So I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the rate that you were able to get the city as well.
Sure.
So thank you for doing your diligence on this.
Mr. Hattridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we are definitely in the high technology stage of life here. I just have a question. PC-Matic won't help us?
Pardon me?
PC-Matic won't help us? No?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Kind of like a Band-Aid will help you.
Mr. Vaca?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sutton, first of all, I don't believe in Facebook and anything like that, because that's, I think, one of the downfalls of the United States. However, what are we investing into stopping these hackers? Is it through this, or is it through something else?
Included in this program, you do get some loss control services, and you do get AIG providing you with information on how to prevent something from happening, and they review your current systems, and they're providing that to try to prevent it. Other than that, you know, it's a tough nut to
Mr.
crack, really.
Mr. Sutton, again, AIG, that rings a bell with me. Did that have something to do with the crash a couple years ago?
Yeah, some years back, they did have.
And we're supposed to believe them?
Well, they're A-rated, A-excellent rated. They're still a strong insurance company. There was a little bit of a bailout at the time, but
And we bailed them out.
we did.
We gotta believe in Facebook.
Yeah. The other options we had, in addition to AIG, were Lloyd's carriers, and I believe an AM Best rated standard carrier would be better than a Lloyd's carrier, so.
Well, with you believing that, I trust you. I will go with it then.
Right.
Thank you.
Should have had insurance with you, right? Okay, Ms. McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sutton, I'm too very glad to see this. My husband works for, he's IT security for Lincoln Electric, so we have table talk about this all the time. I would like to ask Mr. Kraus if he could inform council at one point what is being done citywide to protect us from hackers. I know China employs, I think, several 100,000 people full-time. The whole purpose is just to hack into systems. So it would be encouraging to know what we're doing to discourage that as a city. So.
Right, I'll review with
Kraus?
Chairman of the Councilwoman. I will review with Mirafex and write a memo or something to let you know. I admittedly don't know everything that we're doing because it gets above my level of expertise. So I'll review that and get that to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. It's being asked that this be forwarded to council for its first reading this evening.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Sutton. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.